down the road, say that big area, and somebody comes in with the right amount of money, they may say, well, we'd like to rezone this industrial and do some more industrial. It's like, I mean, that would be an option. You can always rezone, but the thing is, like I said, the taxes, that's one of the bigger things when you annex some of these properties, because all of a sudden you were to zone it something that was residential, and the county assessor's office shoots up the taxes. So it makes a huge difference on these guys.
Taxes, and the goal, I think, was to set up zoning that fits as they do business today. We're not asking anybody to change.
And if you ever do the community or comprehensive plan or whatever down the road, you guys as a community might say, we want to see this like more highway business or different things. And that's what, if the community votes on that, that's regardless of what that person wants or not. If the community as a consensus votes on that and wants to see different types of zoning, that'll be in the future land use plan. Then it could potentially say, we want to rezone you down the road because this is what our community development plan. But that's a separate issue. Right now, it's at least giving an option to say, we have these available. And like I said, Brookhurst is probably one of those places that they won't even consider the thought if you didn't have something like this. There's no way they would even want to be close to annexing in. Their property values would go up really well if you had sewer.
And that's one of the things, like the section we're looking at, the annexation now, brings in being part of the town, opens up opportunities for us to go out with grants and things like that. Really are hard to come by.
And to be able to do that when you have this giant space between, I mean, we come all the way down here and we're here, we surround it. So that's the other part about the annexation is we surround this property over 75%. And so we can forcibly annex them, and we are. There's no choice with it because as far as emergency services, as far as those people accessing the property, where do they access it off? They access it off the infrastructure, your roads, your,
as well as water
resources.
There's a tap on the other side of the road that needs water.
So it really needs to be done, not only in terms of just the emergency services, but it's absolutely a logical extension of the current boundary.
So I'm assuming everyone also understands that so past the green, those gray areas around orange are already in town boundary. So
Yeah, that's corporate limit.
So we're already all surrounding these pieces. Really a lot.
We don't have enough to forcibly annex Brookhurst, unless maybe I don't know if that's even 75%, even if you had the refinery. But again, I mean, this whole side of the river pretty much really needs to be annexed as far as just general services. I mean, right now they're paying 150% of the water. I mean, so you come in and the thing is if you have somebody that comes in like Brookhurst, then all of a sudden you can get grants. You can do those things as a municipality to help them do it. The other option is like what they're telling them over there. If you guys want sewer, you can do like a LAD, a local area district, grants. Basically, you just add it like a 30-year tax-free loan on, just added to your yearly property taxes that comes out every year that helps pay for the infrastructure. And they go, well, that's a lot more money. Well, true, but when you have to replace your septic system, and it's going to cost $15,000, and you got to just come up with that. at whatever percent whatever loan they get. So you sit there and think, if you had the sewer, you probably, it's going to save you in the long run. So there's a lot of that you have to, as I would say, as a council, you get people like that. If we go that route or try to get these guys on board, and they're going to have a lot of questions, but that's some of the stuff that really, that sells it and say, look, you got to look at all sides of this on the expenses of running your property with a septic system. And, you get cheaper trash pickup. You get cheaper water. You save money on all sorts of things. So,
But everybody understand, that's not what we're after.
No, we're not right now.
We're just after the county sections here. So clean up with basically our southern border.
and Mike, can you attest to that as far as what I said, you guys training them on your boundary,
Yeah.
not being able to chase them? Well, just kidding.
And the guys with law enforcement and stuff, so our new people don't have deputy cards, all old people have deputy cards. So to be covered, so like the intersection over here at Walsh, we go to a crash, those who don't have deputy cards, they just be requested to be covered in what's called an umbrella. You understand? Liability umbrella. So all that green area is going to uncluster a whole lot of frustration that they both for us and county and our patrol center, because Yellowstone Highway is also highways, so the whole green area. And troopers don't typically respond to the crashes there. County usually out of positions. We're doing, and then all the other ones spots that go first. And all those spots. The one on the railroad tracks, we just working crash there where a lady dukes a hazard out of the parking lot. And yeah, so it helps us immensely. It's like Curtis, we work quite a bit of stuff that occurs on and off ramps as it is. Well, we sit there waiting for them to show up. So if we're already there, we might as well just.
Well, we are not pulling any of that right away. We're just going to our current boundary. Yeah, on that southern side. So this is the original map, and we determined, because the city of Casper really didn't want to go into that middle area, we just kind of backed up.
Like the off ramp, so the intersection that off ramp is. There's. Let's say,
And I've had discussions with Casper about southern border. Basically, I'm coming up with who's going to take what, where's that line going to be, but those are ongoing discussions.
Well, and just so you know too, one of the problem areas was trying to come up with something to that Walsh intersection. So I'm having the surveyors basically kind of run straight south from the western side of Western down to a point that hits the right-of-way line of kind of the path, but it's not. It's going to run right underneath the edge of the overpass. I said, I don't know how to do that, but I said, that would make sense at the edge of the overpass. I guess that's where our corporate limits. So pretty much, because there's no way to identify it. So that will be, I said, that would be the easiest way. You look up if you're underneath the overpass and you think it's like, that's close enough. And it runs down to that point and kind of up. It's goofy, but there's really no way to identify it. You have to have something almost physical. So I was like, just use the edge of it, and that way we could say it's the edge of tell you, tear that down, and then we'll put stakes in the ground. But yeah, there's a couple areas. We just wanted to make sure, by all means, to cover that little rectangle piece. So we know that pretty much, because we also didn't want to go follow more underneath the bridge, because then we're starting to talk about, well, who actually paid for Walsh? Casper. So we don't want that. So like we're just sidewalk to sidewalk, kind of around that edge. So
I think the goal is eventually to get to where Evansville and Casper's road boundaries, this boundary butt up, so.
it would be
No
nice.
area in between.
It would have been nice to just hit the center line, but
Eventually.
that would have been really easy to just say. I think the growth boundary is described per center line of I-25. The growth boundary, not the corporate limits. So when we do that, I think we're still identifying that from the old one up till that point. And then it's going to do some jogs that's going to be different, and then run up the line a little bit to the west, and then it'll jump back onto that section line and go straight up. So I was trying to come up with something that made as much sense as possible, but the growth boundary on that side of the section line is where that property line is too. So I was like, that was the easiest way to really identify that whole thing until we come up with something better with the city of Casper, because that whole northern little piece of land that's on the north side of Knife River, it really is only truly accessible through the town of Evansville. It should be pulled in, I think, at some point, but I guess that's not our call right now. It's going to have joint agreement on that one.
So Scott, am I reading this correctly, that the urban agricultural zone would allow for mobile homes, but the urban residential would not?
That's something I should almost change that to, we have mobile home. We don't even have mobile homes anymore. That's pre-74, that's pre-HUD. That was mobile home. So nowadays, the real term is manufactured homes. It meets the current standard. So we should change that, all that stuff. It bugs me, but most people just say, oh, mobile home. But no, that's just something I said UA, it was by special, special use. Actually, that should be CU. That was from the other one. I forgot to change that because they have SRP.
For conditional use?
S is, yeah, it should be CU.
Okay.
The reason why I have that in there is because for urban ag residential, which again, that would be Brookhurst, but there are some mobile homes in there. So you can say, no, we don't want any, and they would be fine. They could still continue to be that legal non-conforming use I'm talking about. The other thing that they have is currently there's a couple lots, not very many, but there's a couple lots in there that do not meet on page 6, or well, yours might be different, but the minimum lot areas of 1/2 acre and 1 acre. There's a couple of lots in there that are like 7,000 square feet. How they broke those up, or maybe they were already there, because even in county zoning, they don't have that low of a minimum square footage. So I don't
They're
know.
already there.
But if they're there, it's one of those, it's like, we've had that issue all over town. I mean, it's like, okay, you're fine. We're not going to make you change that. But 7,000 square foot could still, if that trailer goes out, or you said, oh, and they don't use it for so much period of time, and they say, oh, we want to bring another trailer. I mean, that's where the town says, no. And 7,000 square foot's enough to put a house on. So, I mean, it's not like it's a little trailer lot or something. So, but yeah, you're going to have a couple of those instances. Everything else that's in green, there's no problems with. I mean, those are all big lots. The minimum lot width you could put down again. That's something that these are all just for general reference. I mean, you guys might say, well, we want to see a minimum lot width of 70 feet. Okay. That means like if they platted a lot, it's gotta have minimum front access width, just like what we have in all of our other zoning districts. Some of them don't have anything because they say, oh, well, you want to be able to put this little wedge up here and access off, and then you have this big lot, you know, there's little flag lots and stuff. So it's one of those things where, you know, I would say at least 40 would be a safe bet as far as even on a flag lot for residential or an urban ag would be safe. But yeah, the front yard setbacks, they made it over there at that new one I was just talking about, Platteview Estates, they made it 40 feet because they allowed them to do ditches instead of putting curb and gutter and all that, because just the expense of something that's that big, you only sell this many houses. So you have these big lots. So if you require asphalt and curb and gutter and all this stuff, it jacks up the price a lot. So that's going to put it on the homeowners or the property owners that have to buy that. So what they did is can we do ditches? And it's like, I think they got ditches down there in that River Park one too. And so it saves them a little bit of money. They only have 20-foot wide roads, which it's like, okay, cool. But have 40-foot setbacks. That's in the HOA. It's a requirement because then people can pull off the road on the other side of the ditch, and there's plenty of room between the house and the property line. So again, these are just general references. They can be changed based on logical evaluation. So that's where you guys come in. Corner sides yard setbacks, 20 feet is a lot, but when you're talking about a 2-acre property or even a half-acre property, 20 feet can be met pretty easy. The minimum distance between buildings to adjacent lots can be 10 feet. I mean, as far as like fire goes, but again, when you start looking at these bigger lots, half-acre or 1 acre, 20 or 40 feet isn't that much. Then it makes people kind of put their giant shops 20 feet over here or 40 feet over here and another giant shop. So it gives plenty of room and they're not breathing on each other. So again, those are just for reference, and you guys can change whatever you want, however you want it, as long as it's not too small. That's all I can say. That's the only thing I would ask. But, moving on, going to the garage setbacks, accessory building setbacks, which can be a shop or garage, I guess, kind of the same thing. They're just reference. The accessory building max size, our current codes for residential areas in town is 15% of the lot area, or 1,500 or whichever is less based on. So if you have a 10,000 square foot lot, you could have 15% of the lot area. You could have up to a 1,500 square foot garage, which is pretty nice size. When you're looking at half acre or you're looking at 1 acre, I think 15% pushing a little bit like too small. If you have the room to do it and you want to put a, 3,600 square foot shop on your lot because you have a tractor and a boat and some 4-wheelers and an RV, and you have an acre, yeah, I probably would increase it. I mean, that's how you get people to come in, because they have all those toys. So they have to spend a little bit of money on these bigger lots, but they get the toys. I posted right behind that, just for your reference, the current SR1 suburban residential zoning for Natrona County, which is Brookhurst. So you can kind of see what they have in there for their SR1 and SR2 districts. That's currently what they are. And so, I mean, you can find that there's some things in there that, in there they've got as a conditional use permit an arena, a recreational arena, commercial recreation, mobile home park. I mean, those are things I probably would say mobile home park, or wouldn't agree, say, no, we don't want that. We have a mobile home park zoning district. So there's things like that where I just want to let you know that those things are currently allowed or by conditional use permit in the Brookhurst area. So that's funny though, is it says minimum lot size is 2 acres. And like I said, there's some lots in there that are 7,000 square feet. I'm just like, huh, well, they must have been in place or must have been cut up prior to maybe what they zoned it. That's all I can think, because they shouldn't have allowed after the fact. If it was zoned this, they wouldn't have allowed somebody to cut their lot up into 7,000 square foot. So that's all I can come up with on that. But again, just for your reference, so you can kind of see what they're doing compared to something like what we do. And then, yeah, if you have any ideas, we do, just for your reference, we do have to have these zoning districts in place when we annex. So the quicker you review and get your feedback in, I can get that updated, because once we need to pull those in, started on that prior to the annexation. The annexation is going to take a couple months, but you got to have that in place when you send out and say, we're zoning you to this, you better have it in place. And with that, the ordinance would be approximately, once you submit it with the public hearing, takes 15 business days prior to the P&Z meeting. And then you got, once it gets to the council, then you have 3 readings. So you're talking a month and a half just for your meetings, and probably another half a month before that. So it takes about 2 months to get these things through. So.
I apologize for everybody for doing a work session right as soon as y'all started, but that is why, because of the importance of timing of this,
Yeah.
because it's something we need to.
Yeah, every ordinance that comes from the text amendment or something like that, I think you guys can do like emergency ordinances and different things, which speeds up the process a lot. We have to, with text amendments, we have to do a public hearing at P&Z, and then they have to forward their recommendations to the council. And then the council, once you guys approve it, then it's, 3 readings. So it takes a little bit.
All right, thank you, sir. Does anybody have any questions?
That's a lot. I'm sorry.
No,
Oh, no.
I'm
I
not
think you explained it a
questions
lot.
yet, but I'm
If you
taking
have any
notes.
questions, please give me a call or send me an email. I'm on the emails. They're sradden@wlcwyo.com. But yeah, if you have any questions concerning zoning, annexations, variances, et cetera, anything to do with anything we do in our regulations, yeah, feel free to shoot me a text or an email. And that's probably the best way. That way I can review it and type it in and copy and paste and give you all the information. It's a lot easier than trying to tell you on the phone. Plus, I talk a lot, if you haven't understood by now. So it's easier if I can just put it all on a document and send it to you as well. And then if you have any questions, then give me a call. But yeah, that's what I'm here for. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And maps, if you need any maps. I did make maps for Janelle, free of charge, for some of the county assessor stuff. I didn't charge the town. She was wanting to know why the taxes, all these people that have all these, it went up like $6,000 the next, from 19 to 20. And I said, well, I'll do some stuff, and I'm just on the side.
Bunch of hearings going on down in the county right now.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I think my office filed like 40 appeals.
Well, looking at it, did I get you that table? Didn't I send you the table for all the properties in Evansville? I can get you well, Denise. If you go to Denise and you ask her because Patrick and then Seth saw Patrick get it and he's like, I want one of those. So then she spits out this list and it's basically all the assessed values on all the properties and just for Evansville. So you can see in it, and it's got the geocode and all that with it, but you can see the address, the property owner. So you can see, and then if you're looking at like the 2019 values, like in GeoSmart, and then you're looking at the newer stuff or whatever, but you could see, I don't know if it says the 2019 and then the 2020 values, but yeah, there is just, mine actually went down like $24. And I don't understand that because
Take a look, because mine did as well, but upon further investigation, they reduced my house value and increased my land value, which makes me wonder what's coming next.
well, and then some people that nothing changed had a $6,000 increase on their property tax. Now I know one of the guys at work had his roof redone, and then they jacked up his value of his house $6,000. That's how much the new roof costs. He goes, well, what is my old roof? What was that valued at? Because didn't that have value? So anyway, well, thank you for having me tonight. I'll let you get on with your other stuff. Is there anything else that you had on there?
I don't think so. The one thing that I had not on everything, that I'd like to have a discussion on was the mobile home component. That was the one thing kind of in the rural type area. I don't want people like homes.
And you can say, we don't want to see manufactured homes. We want to see modular homes. I mean, that might be at least an option that you say we still, because again, sometimes it's not because you don't live there, but maybe that neighborhood, there's a lot of stick builts, and then there's some mobile homes, and they're saying, well, we would really like to see more of the modular homes in there because the value of their property. I mean, that's the thing. If you allow manufactured homes into anywhere, you could absolutely bring down the value of the properties around it, and it, unfortunately, but that's just the way it is.
Well, the one thing I like that clarification of there is it is a conditional use.
Yeah, and then you can
That can be
determine,
basically looked at on.
and that's one thing about conditional use permits and zoning. A lot of times I push for those, and they're a little bit of a pain, but a conditional use permit makes the neighborhood aware. It's like 300 foot in, or you make it 140 feet, which the state I think is allowing up to now. So you do a buffer zone around that property, and it's like you have to notify all these people that's in that neighborhood. So it's giving the neighborhood a little bit more to say we yay or nays, so they can send that in and say, no, we don't want this.
Because they live there.
Because it used to be 300 foot. That's why I like 140 feet, because 300 foot can go even to the next block over, which they don't have as much say, like especially like on a home occupation or different things like that. But the one good thing about conditional use permits is it actually gives you guys a lot more teeth. It's like, we may consider it, but you better sell us on it, and you better have the approval of the people around you. And then if nobody has problems with it and it makes sense, then you can determine as a council, you can say, yeah, I don't think this is a bad idea. Versus if you just permitted use, it's permitted.
Or just, we've had some people come to council, what they call the garage house now.
Shouse.
Yeah, but we approved one of those not too long ago, but they really put together a really nice plan.
Yeah, and we ran into one in Mills that was a gigantic commercial building that they sold us on the Shouse. Way bigger than what. Anyway, well, thanks, guys.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
See you soon. Oh, I'm gonna be on Friday, so you know if anybody's looking for me. I'm going to Indianapolis, drive my daughter to Indianapolis. I'm gonna get on planes on that 18-hour drive. We're leaving Thursday night. Big buddy.
Sound like a lot of fun?
She's
You enjoy that.
She's going to Korea, and then
Oh,
she's
wow.
going to move to Japan and go to school the last senior
Oh,
years.
that'd be
Oh,
fun.
awesome.
I'm like, okay, I might see you in a couple of years.
Yes.
Love you.
Fun to come back and
Send you money.
Just send pictures.
Yep.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have to preface by apologizing because when at our last work session, I made notes and I believe that I edited most of them with those notes, but I had COVID and I don't really remember what I was doing. So, and it's actually kind of nice because you guys weren't there.
But Janelle gave you some copies of some stuff, and then I have one more copy. So at the last work session, we discussed a drug and alcohol policy, a background check policy, a whistleblower and special reporting policy, a mental health policy, and an evidence room policy. We also discussed updating the fraternization policy. I have not updated the fraternization policy. The evidence room policy, I'm just going to work on with the chief since it's really more his zone. So before you, we will have to discuss the whistleblower and special reporting policy, which didn't have any comments from the last work session, but now that you both are new, it'd probably be good to look over it and ask whatever questions you have. The background check policy, which I expanded for all employees. You can see it's split into two kind of sections for police department employees and all employees. The drug and alcohol policy, which we updated a couple different things. And the mental health policy, which I also expanded to be more inclusive about all employees and to delete some repetitions that the mayor had pointed out. So if the mayor wants to kind of pick what order we can go in, that's totally fine with me. Janelle is printing out the drug and alcohol
I'll
policy.
start with the background policies.
Okay. Okay, cool.
The typo what I found is under number one, the kind of role, employee hiring requirements. The first sentence is every applicant for employment as a peace officer. And since that's actually number two, I would assume that we want to be there.
Ah, yes.
Disregard what I said earlier. Or handed out earlier. Got it.
Take a small piece.
No, yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's hard when you look at something so many times.
Oh, I'm sure.
And the chief can talk more about this, but at our last work session, I know some of our discussion points were surrounding how much reference to code we should include in there and what kind of we wanted that to look like, so that's also a work in progress.
I'm going to offer some thoughts here. You may not like my thoughts, but I'm going to tell you my thoughts because I don't beat around the bush. Statutorily, Post promulgates the rules and regulations. And you can find that under 91701 through 711. I printed all the Post rules. My opinion of creating a policy, because at this point, we will be the only community in the entire state of Wyoming creating a specific policy governing what is already created by statute as a knee-jerk reaction for something that happened a long time ago. So since these chiefs in the past didn't do the correct thing back then, Post has created what they call the Arcades order. And so when I hire somebody, I have to follow everything that's in here already, and I have to attest to everything on here. If I attest to it and I don't do it, well, it's essentially perjury because I'm saying and follow your statutory rules and regulations. So do we really want to be the first community in the entire state of Wyoming to create a policy? And we already got a statute and form that I have to fill out that says, well, the argument was, well, for future chiefs, it doesn't change one way or the other. So I think having a general policy says the town will hire people that are blah, 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 but putting something specific about the police department, I think is a knee-jerk reaction to an attorney's report that we paid way too much money for. And that's my opinion.
Can I look at that? Did you check off, please?
Absolutely. So this is just a printout of it.
Okay.
And there's a few little weird things that when it printed, I don't know why it printed this way.
All right.
So when I go through, because I have to log in, there's this whole thing to go through here. And it has everything right here that's
Already
here in the
that
rules and
policy.
regulations.
Okay.
So I have to go through here. I have to attest to every single one of those. I even have to scan in, so like their diplomas. I have to scan in the DCI letter. I have to put down exactly when the background checks are done. I have to put all of that stuff in here, and I have to check I attest. And so like like DCI letter stuff, I then have to check a little box that says personal information, thou shalt not release. And I go through here, and so if it's somebody that's like if I hired Mr. Scott here, I have to put in here all of his information. And so this has all been done like 2 years ago. So you go through here, background, examination. And what they don't print on here is these little boxes that pop up that says I attest to all this stuff. And all through, and at the end, I have to sign it that I did exactly as proposed.
And that's the same thing that's already in our policies.
We don't have a policy for it.
Good.
We would be the first community in the entire state to create such a policy. Rules and regulations. Okay. So 2018 post rules and regulations. Last time it was
This is for Wyoming.
peace officer standards and training. So when you go to this little thing right here, there's your statutory authority pursuant to 9171 through 711. Peace officer in training is required to adopt rules and regulations, standards. Yada, yada, yada. So then I short sheet because they have a whole lot of things to do with coroners and detention, dispatch. But when you flip right over here, exactly everything that you're wanting to put in a policy. So these rules are through them. Anytime they change it, well, you have to go back and change that. When I already have to test it all. So I object to us being the very first community in the entire state of Wyoming to creating specific about hiring 4 PD officers, because if I don't follow those, well, it's perjury, or any chief in the future. So I think it's a knee-jerk reaction to that side of things because of a report. And that's my opinion of it.
We already checked the school records, the military records, the DCI and FBI fingerprints, the driving record, employment, credit history, the Wyoming Post files. Then you give them the mental. So that's already checked.
So I guess as a clarification, this is repetitive to what the police department has to do. This would be a policy handbook this would go in the employee handbook that all employees would see or any prospective employees would see. So I assume that every applicant for a PD position knows that post is being reviewed, and that's kind of, that's the normal thing that they go through. It was recommended to us that we maybe highlight that that's what we're doing, because if somebody just sees the employee handbook and they don't see any reference to what background checks or employment things, hiring procedures a police officer needs to go through, that they might be like, well, that's weird. So that's where this came from. It's totally up to you guys. I think the chief has a very well stated point that it doesn't make sense to reiterate everything, but maybe just having a mention that please refer to our police specific handbook regarding employment hiring policies, requirements, and background checks specific to a peace officer out of Evansville. I think that's totally something that could be worked in, and we could just delete essentially subsection 2, and just say, please see blah, blah, blah. So that I
So
think
that,
would be.
like, does each officer have access to this, or do you give the officers this?
You can type up Wyoming Peace Officer Standard Training. They have a whole big website, forms. They have the whole rules on there. You can print off. Now you don't have access to Arcades because that's officers' personal information and stuff
Right.
like that. So I can go into it. So for
But if you
instance,
hired an officer, do they have access to this,
Oh.
or do you?
Yeah.
So they
I
know
rep-
of
so-
this if they're going to be
Yeah, they-
hired to be an officer?
so for instance, I just put out a thing to job services,
Mhm.
and it says right in there, Peace Officer Stand Training. It talks about that because I have to have it in there per this stuff. So
You hire an officer without performing all the post checks?
no,
That's what I.
if I did, it would be bad juju.
Right, no, if it was bad juju, it's done. And you just choose. to
Well, if
Not do it.
I could, if I want to set myself up for being charged with perjury and a whole bunch of violations and get myself in trouble. I mean, anybody can. Having a policy about it isn't going to prevent that if they do. In the past, so these rules have been there a long time. Prior to the Arcades program that came about 3.5 years ago, it was all done by paperwork. So you went on, you pulled the paperwork off, you either typed your hand, filled out, you sent it in. But now it's all digitalized. So I have to go through and type it all out. It takes about 20 minutes from start to finish because as I build their personnel files, as I go through the testing, I have to find each thing. So like the drug test. So once I get the drug test results from Janelle, that goes in there. So then I'm getting old, so I have to actually look at the dates and see when they're completed. So like the background investigation. So at any point you guys want to look through one of these files, you'll see what the difference is between what's supposed to be happening, what didn't happen in the past, and go through there. And it's like the DCI letter, I have to scan it in, and then I create a file on the computer that says personnel. So I keep a file for each officer on there. So anything that's scanned will then be at least in there, plus the paper
Plus you
version.
have the paperwork. So that was my next question. You always have paperwork backed up along with it on the
Correct.
computer and through their system, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is there any way that we, go ahead, Troy. Is there any way, like you were saying, that we just put a small sentence instead of having to?
Yeah,
add all this in
100%.
here?
So I wrote all of these, and I mean, they're all just kind of up for all kinds of interpretation and changes because these are the policies that we want to implement in our own town.
Right,
And so from a liability standpoint, I would recommend that we have a mention that this
Right.
is what we follow so that an outside agency could see, oh, they do have a policy that is really extensive and they're following, but they're supposed to be going per statute and it's not totally reiterated here because it's a portion.
I was wondering if we could just have a one sentence that says all officers will be hired according to the post guidelines.
yes,
Because what I'm
yes.
looking at is more along the lines of you get in trouble for perjury, but the town saying if you didn't follow the post guidelines, you can be fined. So that's what I'm looking at is
Okay,
you have
I
to
see what
have
you're saying.
something outlined.
So as long as something's written in there that covers,
Then yeah, then we say
everyone.
you didn't follow those guidelines.
Again, we'll be the first in the state to do this. So if that's what you want, we're
Well,
good with it.
the
So,
town has no.
Right.
No repercussions. You said other chiefs didn't follow these. Basically, if you don't follow it, there's nothing to say that the town should follow it. You didn't follow the
Right.
guidelines of town.
I mean,
doesn't that go back to the state of Wyoming? That
Right.
if he's not, if he.
right. I mean,
if
because
he
it
tried to go
says
get a
in
job
there, I
somewhere
have to,
else
it's
and
not
he
a
doesn't,
town specific thing, but it's something you can reference to for post regulations. So, I mean, if you want a one line thing that says town will follow, blah, 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 I don't care about that. But I think having cookie cutter stuff from everything that's already in here statutorily plus post, I think it's a knee jerk reaction. So,
No, I agree with that. I was looking for something that give town.
Chief, I have a quick question.
also-
In that.
so what you're saying, Mayor, is
Um,
you just want something that
What
if
do you-
they're not in Right.
Because right now, the town.
I believe so. Yeah. Yeah,
Nothing we
so.
can do.
The town can't?
I don't believe so. That's state, with the state regulation. State statute. So, there's nothing we could get in and discuss maybe an increase.
Okay, I see what you're saying, that's why I asked. Okay. So, on a legal standpoint though, if we just had a sentence stating that the chief of police adheres to the post 2018 and or current.
Just need to probably leave it at post.
Yeah, just
So
leave it at
there's a,
Constantly updated.
yeah, so there's, okay,
Right,
so there's a director that's over post. It's paid through the state of Wyoming. And then he answers to the post commission. Post commission's made up of different sheriff's chiefs, the attorney general, and I know there's a couple other people. It's like a 7-person panel. And so they meet several times a year. So if post were to find out a chief or a sheriff, well, not so much a sheriff because they're elected, but a chief who's not elected, violated any of this, post can decertify. Say, you're out of here. Once you're decertified, we'll grab a job. So,
okay,
or
that's
charge
what I
them.
was saying.
so like if you,
Could.
Good.
In the situation we're talking about, it didn't happen. So what I'm saying is,
It-
we had a situation where these guidelines were not followed, there was no repercussions
For that,
for that, those
well,
actions.
and there wouldn't have been because the chief were fired that all this happened with in the past.
okay.
So, for instance, I'll use poor Leo here in the corner because I always like to use somebody's reference. So he gets himself terminated because he did some actions that weren't appropriate. When I do the terminations on people, whether they resign or terminate, like from employment, we're severing ties with you, then I have a whole nother form I have to fill out in Arcades that's a separation. And with that, I can request somebody to be decertified. We had an officer last year that I terminated, and I said they need to be decertified because chiefs and sheriffs are the guardians through post in a sense to make sure we have good officers in the state. And sometimes when people do really grievous things, they obviously shouldn't be working in the state. Once I file that paperwork with post, they have a review panel. So that post commission,
There's 7
Twice.
people.
right, that 7 people along with the director, well, then they go through, they look at the termination process. I have to send, so my 7-page termination letter I typed up, I have to give that to post. That's a requirement. Because if I don't, they come blowing my phone, they'll show up here. They can, so anytime, and branching out of the hiring and terminations, if I do a training, so I say, okay, all of you in here, we're going to train on use of force today and go through curriculum, they can show up and do an audit on our training curriculum as well. So back to the decertification, they then review, they look at, and just like a court of law, that, so Leo can come in and he can be like, you know, no, I shouldn't be certified for whatever his argument is. They're going to have all my termination stuff. I will then get called down there as well and say, no, you should decertify because I also, beyond this termination letter, we have a whole personnel file that says, blah, 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 you shouldn't be an officer. So then the panel meets, they discuss, you're terminated and decertified. So,
And that makes sure that you do not work in the state of Wyoming. as
correct,
a
ever,
Police officer again.
ever. You're
Okay.
done. Once they
Okay.
decertify you through post, you're done. So the guy, last February, they got terminated. It's about a 6-month process or so. So by the time I submit everything, blah, 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 and they do their stuff, because they also have to send a letter to them to say, hey, you've been decertified. And they will decertify people on their own. If a chief sends a termination letter and they don't recommend it, but they see what's in there, post can take that step beyond and say, no,
Decided that's
and
what
we're going
they
to
don't want in their
decertify.
state.
Beyond that. So,
Okay.
so that in particular individual, he applied at a whole bunch of places. Post reached out to one of them, Douglas, and said, no, we're fixing to decertify this guy.
That was my
Applications.
next question is, after they get terminated, if you start this process, can they go out and get a job somewhere else? What happens in that process?
So in the world of law enforcement, so again, Leo here, he's applying to that PD. In the application process, there is a waiver form at the back they sign Same thing with sheriff's office, Casper T. All of them have this. Once you sign that waiver, I can go, so if he worked for Casper, they fired him. Once he signs the waiver, I can go over there and look through his personnel file all day long or vice versa. So those waivers, so if said officer, which he applied at Douglas, once he signs that waiver, they have access to the termination letter. They have access to the personnel file. So any reprimands, verbal write-ups, anything in there. Now, any sane, normal, competent administrator sees what's in these files from these guys, they're going to be like, nope, sorry, you're out of here. Now, sometimes some people get terminated from an agency due simply to politics. So the administrator can go and say, well, I think you're a fit here, but there's some, and that's if they're not decertified. Once they're decertified,
That's it.
they're done.
Okay.
So you take somebody, we had a new recruit that I terminated because he academicked out of the academy. He didn't study, he failed his third test, and they said, you're out of here. And I'm like, well, I was paying you to learn, so now you're out of here. That's not a termination and a decertification. So if another agency, he signs waiver, they come over here, they're gonna say, well, why'd you terminate? Well, he academicked out, and I'm gonna, everything I've documented. They may say, well, it's been 2 years or it's been 6 months, maybe he just wasn't fit. They can choose to hire him, but it's not an egregious termination to where it would warrant a decertification. So,
Makes sense.
so just because they're terminated, yes, they can, but if you go, if a chief or sheriff is saying decertification, it is all discoverable once they sign that waiver. And so from there, because we can say, here's this, oh, here's my form that says request for decertification. Oh, well, why are you wanting that? Oh, let me pull up the termination letter. Let me pull, and I pull everything up, evaluations. So we do all those evaluations, part of the checks and balances.
Okay. Makes more sense. Thank you.
Welcome.
I don't have any more questions.
So thoughts on how we want to address that?
I think if we just put reference to the post, I think we're covered. I think that will, something along that line, that's us leaning on that, saying you weren't doing and you know what these job skills are.
And I'm okay with that. If you want like a section 2 that says applicants for the Evansville Police Department will be hired through the post rules and regulations is enough, because that can be referenced, and someday I won't be here. So if future chief, you're having that issue again, they can, that's enough to reference you to this, which can be continually updated. Says, hey, you didn't follow these regulations. So
So
Because I see both sides.
the edit that I just made now reads under section 2, every applicant for employment as a peace officer within the town of Evansville shall be subject to the employee and hiring requirements of the Evansville Police Department and post rules and regulations as promulgated by the state.
I think that's applicable.
That covers us and
Yeah, and that also opens the door for you to create additional policies and procedures on top of that.
correct.
So that gives us that ability.
I'll resend you guys all of the drafts. so you can take them.
okay.
Anybody have any problem with the top section for the standard employee hiring?
I didn't find anything.
I like the fact that we took 2 pages down to half a page.
Still, the background check portion on the bottom applies to both A1 and 2.
So,
So the background
Well-
check is separate, unless you want me to just state in.
That's still covered right here
That's
with
still covered
post.
with
So
post.
that doesn't need to be,
It's by, it's not just for, it's not just for police officers, it's for everybody.
Oh, okay.
So it's like,
Well-
here are the hiring requirements, and then background checks encompass everybody.
Okay.
If you want me to mess with it to, like, cut that down and try and include it in both, I can do that, and so we get to like 1 page if you want that.
I don't think for like Public Works, I don't think you can legally make them do fingerprints to be an employee. Maybe.
You don't want to work for it.
I have one issue with the background check for all employees because that extensive a background check is very expensive.
It is.
If we're talking every employee the town has, that's a lot of expense that we don't go through today.
Yeah, because like a credit check for a Public Works is not something that's probably needed for Public Works.
No, they're not.
Now, fire, I don't know if you do that. But generally for law enforcement, it's done because we have to serve writs or, you know, I mean, that's part of that credibility.
Over the years, our background checks have changed. They used to be not very thorough, and they have morphed into, we use Chateau and Carlson, and they're doing full backgrounds even on our volunteers. And the reason for that is because the volunteers eventually will be part-time and then they're eligible to be full-time. So we're just doing backgrounds at the beginning, so they
So you're not having to do two.
correct.
Okay,
Or have to do it later.
later, right?
And even as a volunteer, it's my opinion, they're still a public servant, so we need to make sure they have a clean background.
They're subject to confidential information with the.
Right.
If,
Right.
you know,
Right,
So
we're,
I
So
think it
our-
should only be applied to.
So
the
essentially,
police
right
and fire.
now, actually, just in the last 2 years, the mayor's well aware of this, because it's cost me more money in my budget, but in the last 2 years, the fire department has went to the exact same background people that Chief Thompson uses, because it is what they do, and they are very good at it, and the backgrounds are very thorough.
so,
We're talking $400-600 a pop,
500.
500. See,
well,
Have you
that's
done
on
this-
his end, but you know, because you don't do psychological stuff.
No.
See, and I
Mine are
do.
just backgrounds without psych, so
Yeah.
mine's only 500, Mike's only.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so just an example, so the two people that we farm our backgrounds out to is Aaron Shadow, which you know him, and Jake Carlson, former Casper officer. We had an applicant we'd offered a conditional to, this was 4 months ago, I think, and she was pretty, were you in on that one?
Not on the interview, but I know the aftermath.
Okay, so anyways, so we have our hiring panel. She was one of 2, I think we interviewed, and she was the only one we picked. So she left out that she may have worked at Rax and was a stripper, and on top of things, which the background people discovered. So going back to, you know, the application, well, there's dishonesty, you're out of here. So although it cost us, I think that one was about $1,500. That's $1,500 that she doesn't have to worry about defending in a lawsuit down the road. You're welcome. So going back to your discussion on background check, rather than having it this way and to shorten things up, would it be simpler to take kind of where you've started with number 2, but make it more in general so that each department has their own criteria for a background in their policy as department head? And I think that could be a pretty short 1 or 2 sentence thing, which would fulfill, I think, this, because Leo is going to have obviously his own criteria.
I've read those too, so.
And I don't want to spend hundreds of dollars to hire part-time mowers.
No,
Right.
no.
So I think that way, then, you know, mayor can go to each department head and say, you know, I'm pretty much covered in a sense, and I have that, but like Public Works, he can say, hey, I need you to create this policy, bring it to me, you know, or however, you know, I don't, do you guys have a particular department head for what you guys do up here? So whoever okay, so like Janelle would create whatever background for the upstairs ladies and whatever, and of course Leo would create his. So I think that would cover it for you guys, just without needing to
I
Yeah,
said,
pay.
depending
I've
on their
already-
job. Right,
we have
that's how
seen-
yours do it.
I emailed Leah our background policy,
Yeah, you give me much stuff, so I have it.
yeah, drug and alcohol and the mental health stuff, which was the same as his, but I think that police department and fire department should have to fix their background check. So it's just something that the town is gonna have to afford to do, because I do think other people should probably be backgrounded, but I don't know if it needs to be as extensive as what public services are.
Right. You know, like a department head, which is a policy that you would probably put within the town general policy. If you're doing a department head background, what that would encompass is going to be probably different than what a department head's going to hire for somebody underneath, vice versa. So some policies. Now, this came about because we had a former mayor and an officer that, well, we all know the story there. What happened prior to me getting here, none of us had any control over. And so that's why I was kind of like, it's not knee jerk a big policy to something that didn't need knee jerk. It's simply somebody didn't do it in the past when they should have been doing it. Having that little piece, if that's the comfort zone that says thou shalt hire this way, I think that's simple, but we don't need to recreate rules and regulations that are already there. Because someday Leo may have, the state may create something for fire and EMS, some state agency regulation. I
He's like,
hate
"Hey."
to say it, but at the rate the political climate of the world is,
Yes.
New York wants to ban having bulletproof vests, but first responders for fire and EMS are rushing to have them there. So,
I just got a grant for $6,000 for vests for all the fire.
and the public outcry at some point may call for something because something may happen in some department. So, like way back in the day when Newcastle had the 16-year-old, was a volunteer
Volunteer
firefighter, and the drunk fire guy rolls the 6x6. All it takes is an incident like that, and the public's going to knee-jerk reaction to
When they,
the circumstance. Right.
because we can't have 16-year-old firemen anymore.
Right. Nor can the volunteer fire departments have their own bars in the fire departments anymore.
Well, darn it.
So, I think, in having it that way really sets the precedent in the future that if something like that were to come about, Leo's already covered anyways, because I think if Leah, I can see you over there. I don't want you to get away from anything. I know, but so like if we are going to word that for the PD, I think there's probably a simple language that would encompass and or any state regulatory agency,
Right.
to some degree. That way,
Some kind of state regulation.
right. So, for emergency services, the town of Evans will adhere to any state regulatory rules and regulations promulgated. And maybe that would be actually a better way than specifically to the PD. That way it says each department head, if there's a state regulatory agency, has to adhere to those rules. And then that way, if in the future, we're already done. We're there.
I like that
Got all
too.
that?
I'll mess with it later.
Wait, anything else before we move on?
I'm so
Okay.
spoiled. My
Great
ex-boyfriend
investment.
just bought a TV that
I got
put
it.
my laptop into, so I have like a 54-inch desktop.
And so when I'm on my laptop, I'm like, I can't see anything. I can't work like this. So
Okay,
All right, now what else you got?
I guess for ease of everything,
let's, if you guys want to run through the whistleblower policy, like that one has no edits, substantive edits,
any comments before, so then
I've already reviewed any comments. I'm gonna use the restroom real quick, but you all review.
That's what I had to do.
I know this one is a little longer.
So this is just gonna
So
pretty much.
Yep.
This one's just. gonna be each post. And it works on that.
Yeah, this is part of that. Oh, and then this.
Do we not currently have a whistleblower policy?
We currently have a special, kind of like special report. It is kind of mentioned a whistleblower. There is like a non-retaliation clause in a sexual harassment statute or policy that we have, but there is no per se whistleblower. And so when I was making the special reporting policy, I was like, why don't other type of harassment. Let's just make an all-encompassing whistleblower policy. Yes.
So some of this already coincides with the special reporting.
The special reporting was like 2 sentences or like 1 paragraph.
Because it basically covered the retaliation and the reporting responsibilities.
So my, what I would recommend that we don't have just a random special reporting, that we have the whistleblower so that it says what you should do and then this is like the exception. Because what we're worried about is that if we only have special reporting, that it would negate people following the chain of command. And we want to encourage people following the proper chain of command and going through the proper procedures before utilizing kind of that alternate option of special reporting
Okay,
where they could come to us or challenge it.
okay. So basically an open door policy.
And encourage people to talk to their superior about issues before.
Before it becomes
That
an
blow up.
okay.
Which is the way it should be.
Yeah, and that's the one caution thing that I would put forth into that portion of it, because, I had an employee who liked to cause problems upstairs and try to corner me and Janelle in an office when he probably shouldn't have been, because he failed to go through, because I have specific policies downstairs that talk about you go through the proper chain of command, and he kept negating going around that, and it was causing frictions. So, so that's the one cautionary thing I would be leery of having an open door policy in a sense. But I also understand why this is here because, sorry, I have to count mayors here. So 3 mayors ago, and a former town attorney, some things were brought up to them and the town attorney recommended nothing happen. And because nothing was done or looked into at that particular time, then set the stage for nobody to report when our last issue came up because they felt like nothing happened the time.
then, or
Right.
what happened this time.
Right.
Okay.
And so
I
that's,
think,
All right,
right, this
just
is
saying.
the special reporting being very
Okay.
narrow. So
yeah,
with that in mind, because I know the.
Okay.
is
Oh, she did make it very, very narrow. The special, oh, you're on. Actually, Ollie, I do like that you have the special reporting very narrow. Because I think that it should be narrow, but that door needs to be open, but I don't think it should be
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
like a giant barn door.
And when we had to utilize, like, the kind of the investigation portion of this and reporting procedures, I looked at our sexual harassment portion because I did the reporting on the sexual harassment issue that we had before, and I felt like it gave me the right kind of path to follow, so I incorporated that, since that's something we have already had.
although I beat our good town attorney up over our background check, she did a really good job with this one.
I'm not
Offended.
I not only have very thick skin, but just.
Well, I'm just,
progress.
No, I'm just saying
So
the
I
way it
have
is.
a
Yeah.
quick question. If you don't feel that you can go through the chain of command with your starts with the supervisor, immediate supervisor, or is there anything in here that tells you what to do in that case?
Yes,
Still
so.
not finding anything.
Isn't that,
And
that's special reporting.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Outside of the chain of command and go to the.
Yeah, so-
Okay,
Reporting
I didn't
pre-
get that far, sorry.
Yeah,
I missed
reporting
it. Okay.
procedures,
Yeah.
A, B, C,
I
D.
got it.
You got it.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, because C talks about chain of command, employees shall report violations and acts under this policy to their direct supervisor. And then D is your special reporting. I had commented on this last time. And my only comment is I actually have no comment. I like it. She did a good job. I don't see changes.
That was the only one that I couldn't find, and I don't it's there, so.
But this was the only policy we didn't ask for changes.
Yeah.
Well, if it makes you feel good, I drafted from scratch just for you. So
Well, thank you for that. You covered it.
Good job.
I never looked at it.
I like it, Aaliyah.
So does anybody have any discussion about that one?
No, that was the only one that, jumped out at me, but I should have read it.
Where would you like to go next?
I think the only one we have to talk about is the mental health policy.
Okay.
And then I will, for the next work session, have an updated, more inclusive fraternization policy for you.
Well, Janelle handed us drug and alcohol testing as
Yeah,
well.
we got the drug and alcohol testing
Oh,
policy
yeah,
here as
that
well.
one too, that's right.
So we doing mental health now?
Mental health?
Sure.
So last time when we spoke about this, the mayor made a comment to make the initial paragraphs more inclusive for all town employees, which I did. And we had a question if the fire department has one, they do. And I believe that someone made a comment to add no retaliation or discrimination based on the use of mental health services. And I think I added that. So, yeah, look it over. Let me know what you think.
Because I had in my notes, add section on retaliation.
Maybe I didn't do that.
So I do have a question on this policy. So when I was the interim chief, right before Thompson was hired, I actually used the sheriff's office mental health policy to help me write the police department's policy, which then drafted the fire department's policy. So they're all pretty much, minus a few words, they're all fairly similar, other than the respective discipline, really.
Yeah.
Part of that policy that is in place at the PD and at the fire department currently, part of, and you read through those because I emailed them to you. Part of that says that the town will provide the mental health to its employees, but to my knowledge, we don't have a current contract with any mental health provider for that.
That's what we discussed the last work session, and Janelle reached out to EFAP here in town, I believe it's Cassidy, and got us a quote at a per employee cost to offer the services annually to the employee if anything.
So it'd be just like what the sheriff's office has.
Right.
Right?
So,
She
Sheriff,
almost called her back, she never called me back or anything. Yeah, $65 per employee. And that was full-time, and we could also include part-time. They can prorate it for the year, and then it was a $15 one-time joining fee per employee.
I personally feel that that's a bargain.
Yeah.
It is.
Because in our contract with them, that should cover,
Covers the candidate, spouse, partners, children.
In any event,
4 to
I
22
mean,
years of
you
age.
could
Unlimited
stress.
visits.
okay, that's,
stress it out.
it's unlimited visits. So if a firefighter or a cop or hell, a public works employee went to a call that they needed mental health, they could go until their situation or problem was resolved.
Well, it's
So it
not,
wouldn't even have to be work related.
you could have a hangnail that's keep your head back. That's-
Valid point.
It's just totally open, it's whatever is affecting you, they're there.
It basically opens the door for mental health for the employee, period.
We just gotta take care of our employees.
And
So,
that was part of the reason I wrote it for, well, I wrote it for the PD because there was an event that happened that we needed it. I know that sounds weird, but there never used to be one. So when I was the interim chief, I had to write it very quickly because we had to, anyway. And then obviously the fire department
So-
needed it as well, so.
I agree with this policy other than B. This policy came about, again, as a kind of a knee-jerk reaction to a report that we paid too much money for. Simply because said attorney never even asked me about policies and referenced that we needed a policy for something she never asked if I even had, which I still have the same policy that came from the SO and Chief Malsom. So with a few updates to it,
Right.
I think B should simply probably be wording that for emergency service employees of the town of Evansville, the department head So like the definition of
For
critical
all
incident,
emergency services.
right? So instead of being specific to the police department, I think, so overall, I agree with the policy, but changing B that, it says critical incidents for emergency services, and then defining that the department head of those departments, that way it covers Leo, covers me. Now, because a critical incident for us is obviously different than public works, but they could technically still have a critical incident.
And that's what I had mentioned last time. I mean, it could easily happen in public works.
Correct.
It could easily happen here. It should be.
Well, you guys could have some crazy guy come in here for a critical incident for you guys.
Well, we
Right.
just got discussing that it's an overall any mental health, so why are we defining?
So I
Because-
I say take it
because
out.
B,
Yeah. That's all
well,
I
yeah,
agree.
Right, I'm just saying, why do we need it? Because
It's
we just
clearly
defined
states at the top.
any
and
circumstance
that is
you
the
can use
employee.
these services.
Right.
okay, so
I'm not
strike,
sure we need to get-
strike B.
Yeah.
And we're not defining, hey,
And-
this
and I-
event you can take these services, this event you can't.
And I know for a fact, as long as he hasn't changed the policy that much on the fire department's current
Yeah.
policy, all the, the paid time off assistance, negative responses,
Yes.
all of that is covered in our current policies,
And
at
those-
least for our two departments.
Those great
I know
big
that.
books I gave you?
But
Yeah,
I was just to
it's-
say, I've been in the middle of reading it.
Yeah, it's in there. It's in the section 1. That's how
And
important it is.
Aaliyah probably noticed,
Section 1, that's.
Aaliyah probably noticed that the fire department's mental health was strikingly similar to the police department.
Shockingly.
Shockingly.
Imagine that.
Okay, I deleted B and I added a second to last subsection about retaliation. So it's one page,
Okay.
not even. So cool. I will send that to you
And that's
guys.
gonna make- This is gonna make a lot, or this $65, the whole,
Yeah.
the town actually getting a contract with somebody is gonna please a lot of people over there, I can tell you that right now.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Well,
something I'd like to proceed.
Hopefully she can get this in.
Yeah, I'd like to proceed with that and that.
I think,
I think so, that, to me, that is,
I'll put a call back into her again tomorrow.
I think that's a very important thing, town.
I think even more so nowadays.
I think so too. I think it's
Some
great.
people don't, yeah, some people just don't handle things like us old users do. You know, the younger generation, and even some of the old people. But, I mean, I'll probably with a few people that can beat my horses.
But you might need services if your horse falls over.
Yeah.
That, I agree with. I would really get upset.
And I would never expect to know the individual on the other end.
Right. I never even thought about that either.
That completely
Yeah.
took me by
So-
surprise. But it's a small world.
It is.
Okay.
All right, everybody good with the rest of that?
Good job.
That policy makes me very happy.
All right.
so the workplace drug and alcohol?
Okay. So when we previously discussed this, we changed, or we had a long discussion about random testing requirement of what was a reasonable amount of time to show up to the test after you've been notified, because people have weird shift hours. And so I believe that is, you guys, I think that you should just make a decision about what you want it to be. I think we talked about like 2 hours, half a day, whatever you guys want to decide.
If someone's, a quick question then, if someone, you're gonna do a pop test on one of your firecrackers,
Well, we already did on that.
okay, you said you're doing it, how much notice do you give them? Don't you take them right then and there when you
No,
decide?
so right now, anybody that has a CDL is in
The random.
the random pool already, which is
Okay.
a high percentage of my guys. Because we have to have CDLs to drive the engines.
And all the public works.
And all public works. So right now, the random people send Janelle names. She notifies me. And I'm gonna be honest, I get them there at the earliest convenience because there are times when they're on vacation, there are times when they're on days off. No, I don't call them on the phone and say, hey, you're gonna go in for a random next week. They don't get to know that information. But if they're on days off or on vacation, they find out when they come back to work.
Because we're also
And then
trying
we
to
go-
work on shift coverage.
And then we go do it.
Okay.
The only exception to that is I have some firemen that also are on other fire departments. So that can get a little tricky, but we've always made it work.
Mhm.
But if you guys want to set a time frame, good luck. That's all I'm gonna tell you right now.
I actually think Leah has it right under E, so.
I was
page two.
trying to remember where it was.
Yeah, that's page
Oh,
two
yeah, at the bottom.
under E. Talks about employees shall report to the testing site within a reasonable time based on circumstances, which shall not be more than 4 hours. After being notified of the random selection for drug and alcohol testing. There was a big discussion the last time about other events like you're on vacation, things like that.
There are, yeah,
And-
those exceptions.
So exceptions may be made for employees who are unavailable due to authorized leave, travel out of the area, or if engaged in employment or employment-related public emergency. I honestly I think she worded it perfectly.
And I hadn't seen that. but
I
I like that.
generally do 2 hours like on Public Works. I schedule it.
Well, and
That's-
the only time that this would really become an issue is if somebody is evading the test. And that's when we would say, look, in the policy, it says not within 4 hours unless there's these exceptions. You didn't fall under any of these exceptions, and we think that you're trying to avoid your test. Now,
Well,
if
that's
somebody's
fine.
like 5 hours because something happened, okay, whatever, like, I'm not gonna be pissed about it, and Janelle's not gonna be pissed about it.
Well,
It's,
So,
the thing we need to look at here is it's when you tell them to go in. So just because Leo popped up on a random, and I'm the supervisor, I didn't tell him, I don't have to tell him within 2 hours that he popped up for a
Right.
random. I can say, hey, your next shift is Wednesday, now I'm gonna tell you, now you have 2 hours.
Now you have.
And that's generally
Okay,
what,
okay, that's what I wanted to make sure.
Yes.
and once Janelle communicates whoever got popped for it to me, and that's what I tell her, because we always have the discussion, well, when do they work again? Are they on vacation? When can they go? We have that
Do you
discussion.
have somebody that's gonna be available to cover while they're down?
Well, yeah, because that's the other issue for me is if I'm sending them while they're on duty, well, somebody still calls 911, we still have to go to the call. I can't say, well, my guy's being in a cup. I mean,
Yeah, because we utilize a third party to do the collections.
The other thing
Okay.
that was important to me is that we didn't, by this policy, just go create something new. We have a standard procedure in place. So my thought was is if we can make the policy fit the procedure we currently have in place, then we're not reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, this
So-
incorporates kind of every portion of the ones that I've read from
And
the
I haven't
town.
read through this, but is this is expanding on just, because right now it's just the CDL people that get randoms all the time. So is this expanding to the whole town then?
Yeah.
right here.
Okay.
Is it quarterly?
Yeah, I think so.
Here are the plus A, B, C, D, E.
Yeah, so
I mean,
it's just about, it's the, so it's basically
Law enforcement.
security sensitive positions are not limited to law enforcement officers, firefighters, any employee who regularly operates Evansville owned vehicles or equipment, any CDL, anybody who's paramedic, otherwise required for medical services, all department heads, and the catch-all, any other position.
Which would be the
The catch-all.
zoning clerk,
Yeah.
like a court, because it's gotta be everybody.
So
yeah,
I guess, so Janelle, will this be on top of our already doing CDLs? Or like if somebody, so like if I got popped for a CDL test tomorrow, I could get popped again the next day for another one? That seems like an awful lot of money. if I
why not just
do
replace it with this because it includes CDLs and just have one policy?
Right.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, we don't-
Well, just,
But
from a
I think it
monetary,
should only have to be, I mean,
That's,
Yeah.
yeah,
from a
that's,
monetary
That's a lot of money.
standpoint, because I just,
just,
Right.
but the only thing, keep in mind, if you get pulled for a standard employee, you or any CDL holder would run the risk of being pulled for a CDL because that's federal. So you could potentially wind up with 2 tests in a quarter.
Who pays for the federal
I was
test?
gonna
We
say,
do.
because
then
now,
why
But
can't they
see- but
segregate
see-
that?
because that just seems like an
Well,
awful
so
lot of
I
money.
think basically then we want to set up our timing to where our our random testing is after that quarter CDL testing.
Yes, yes.
Because if they just got popped,
Yes.
So do they only test CDLs 1 quarter a year?
No, every quarter.
So
Every-
they're
every-
ongoing, no matter what.
Every quarter,
she
we
gets
run,
she gets a call every 3 months
yes,
for random.
yes.
God bless the.
And so we would do the same thing with the employees, all the employees, but it would just be after the CDL pool's been
Well,
pulled.
why don't we do it at the same time? If we
Well, I
want
think she
employees
was- I
random
think-
and they're already going for a CDL, we
Yeah.
don't have to do two.
Because our CDL people are already in with another
Right,
bigger,
because
Right, but what I'm saying is if this quarter, we pull Leo is
I
for the
got that
towns.
this quarter.
Just saying.
I just did it.
But we also get the CDL that says it's Leo. When we take Leo's town test, give it to somebody else because he's already getting tested for CDL.
but how do
Or
we,
just-
Do we get the results of the federal test?
yes.
So, I mean, that can be the test.
I think we have the
How
discretion.
do we pick?
There should be some kind of discretion, because that's just wasted.
Well, we're gonna be random generating. And if we say that every quarter when you get the federal call, I'm assuming you get all the same people, same day, one call. You don't get just
Right,
this
right,
week, this. So
right.
the first call you're gonna get is gonna be Mike, and it's gonna be Leo, it's gonna be a me, okay?
Mhm.
Well, we also did the town draw at the
Mhm.
same time. And Leo was on it, Mike and Leo wasn't. So we don't send Leo for the town draw, because we're already gonna get his results back to the CDL.
Right.
So we've met our policy by he's gonna test. We're just not.
Oh, I see what you're
What
saying.
if we-
And we're not duplicating the test.
Okay,
What if
right.
we
That's what
add,
I'm
so under section 3, subsection B, Romanet 3, where it talks about any employee who holds, that should be plural, CDL as a term and condition of their employment, we could make like a exception that says the town has discretion to not issue duplicative CDL drug testing in the
Yeah,
same quarter.
that-
Except, do they know it's quarterly? Is that public knowledge?
I don't know.
Because I don't want to disclose, hey, we're testing quarterly, but it's random, you know?
Yeah.
So
I
we'll
don't-
just, I'll think
I
of
don't know
something.
that anybody's really thought about it.
I think I'm pretty much the only one that knows it's quarterly over there, because the CDLs are so random. I mean, I'll be honest, sometimes they don't even pull a fireman. And
No.
then other times they call Janelle and it's like half of my department gets tested.
Well,
So
I think this last time it was all
random.
fire department.
it's completely random. And this last time it was all fire department employees.
Sometimes it's alcohol, sometimes it's substance, sometimes it's both.
Because there's only 2 of us on the PD that have CDLs. So I think it would be a suggestion having
I didn't mean to laugh.
that clause in there that it's at our discretion. So should that scenario come up, then we have the discretion.
Right.
And then that way the CDL policy can be replaced and we're still covered.
Well,
We just
Yeah,
keep it
we're not
there.
doing
If
it
you don't
twice.
say it's quarterly, we just.
Let's look into that and see if we need to have that specific
I
one
was
per
gonna
federal
say, I
law.
wouldn't say the federal policy, because that's a federal guideline
Well,
that we have to meet.
But you can also reference that in here.
Right, right.
So-
We would still do the federal, or the federal requirement.
So under,
And then, and if Leo gets called twice for each one, well, we don't have to do ours,
Because I'll just
because
do
it's already been
the
done under the town.
if she can add it into that section B that she's talking about, so she can have the exemption or, whatever, and then just add one more section that says town will adhere to any federal mandated testing.
Yeah, 'cause
So is that company gonna be the one generating our town random, or is that something that we're doing in-house?
well, we talked about having them do it.
I think it's the easiest way to keep the town out of hot water.
I think I like.
So an employee doesn't appear that they're being picked on.
I like having an outside entity.
Because there has been some employees that felt like they were being picked on, and it was fairly random
Some of
through
mine in particular.
the Natrona County drug testing,
Yeah.
It wasn't me, but
Let somebody
because they kept getting picked.
we had a guy over there that I think hit every quarter of an entire year, so every single time they came up, his name got drawn, and he's like, is there something I need to know about?
Right.
You go to Colorado a lot?
He doesn't.
And then
But-
we've
but
got
that-
one that used to be a full-time that now works for another department, and I think he's been called 3 times
Oh,
in the
yeah,
last year.
yeah, he's been called 3 out of the 4 times. So the good news is I can tell him, I don't generate the names, Janelle doesn't generate the
Yeah,
names, that place
I
does.
think
Yeah.
it needs to be outside, so there is no thought of propriety here.
Yes.
Outside.
Also, we don't want to do that.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Trust
the
me.
Legal could ask for it.
I don't want to deal with it, and neither do you.
Yeah, I think we just keep it outside.
Because we'd be having a lot of hearings
Yes.
about presumptive positive tests, and we would lose them. And I don't have time for that.
Thank
Well,
God
I
those
used
have
to
been
give
few
them
and
the
far
time,
between.
I know.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't worry about any of the guys, but I understand why they do this.
All right, anybody have any thoughts on?
Anything
the rest
else?
of the policy? Okay.
So the consequences of the positive test, that's what I'm just looking at, is
It's basically any,
okay.
So, but to caveat, if you test positive, it's what we call a presumptive positive. It doesn't mean that it's actually positively positive. Then we send it off to a lab to run a second test on it to confirm that positive test. And after that, then disciplinary action can be taken.
Okay.
During the interim, disciplinary action, such as like suspension with pay, can also be taken while we confirm the test.
And what is it usually, 2 to 3 days
I don't know.
average?
Actually, Janelle, I am almost, and I don't want to step on your toes, but when I went and did my MM last time, I was quizzing the guy on how that all worked. And their test where we go straight to the state lab.
actually, I just did my
Cool.
drug and workplace harassment training to date at the city of Casper, and it was, with theirs is a requirement we don't next.
See, and
And I'm
I
thinking it
asked
was like 4 or 5 days.
I asked the guy when I went and did mine, and everything that lab does goes straight to the lab.
Well, that's
There-
cool.
There's no presumptive, little knock test. or
Yeah,
anything.
sometimes it's just the, so maybe let's figure out who we're gonna use. And then
It's,
if we're,
drug testing in Natrona County. It's the
Okay.
case right now.
I mean, I'm fine.
Because if it
Removing
goes straight to the
that-
state lab,
Then it is.
Yeah, yeah.
If it's not a
Positive.
presumptive positive test, we don't need to have it confirmed. But if
Right.
it is, for some reason, like if we changed contracts down the road or something, I'd wanna have that in there because it's a protected right, and, I mean, we have to have it.
but still, if it goes to the state lab, aren't we still gonna have the argument if it comes back positive and we have this written in here like this? They can say, well, that, you should have sent it somewhere else. And then
We
you have
would
to tell
say-
them it went to a state lab, and then they're gonna argue with you because that's the way it's worded in here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, let me think about that. I think that if we,
Can you word it in there somewhere that if
Mhm.
it is coming from a state lab, a positive is a positive? If it's not through a state lab, it goes to a state lab.
Well, there's gotta be the checks and balances of things, so.
let
if
me
it's a-
think about this.
The initial one's gonna be a presumptive positive, then it's gonna have to go to the lab to be confirmed. So just like a drug case, when I roll up next to Leo on a traffic stop here and I get up there and smell the lovely burnt skunk that's in there, we do our field test, it's presumptive positive until we send it to the lab, which then they confirm it, but until then, they're still innocent, in a sense.
Okay.
So in the world of writing drug tests and stuff, I know when I was looking through stuff for the PD and looking at all the national, so I have a computer base that I can go through, ICP.net, and there's like 8,000 policies in there from across the nation. And when I've looked at all the drug testing policies in there, they're all pretty consistent. There's that checks and balances that once there's a presumptive, it has to be tested.
And I think that should stay in there.
I mean, I think that if we had a situation where somebody was the situation you just described arose, we would say, this report that we got is from the state lab. It's been
And that covers
confirmed.
us. We don't
Yeah,
have to-
Yeah, and you know, if they want to retest their sample, they can get it and retest it. So
Okay.
Yeah, they look themselves.
I think,
I just-
I think it
I'm
would be
not trying to
okay.
read too
Well,
much
but
into it,
this-
but I do,
I think
Yeah.
this would come into play if you ever went and contracted with the, whether there's a quick health mark or something over here,
Mhm.
they can do these tests, but they may not. They're doing it in-house, so if they have a positive, that's maybe sent off to the state.
okay.
And I think the reason this place that we're using sends it straight to the lab is because they're federal tests.
I mean, it makes sense. I think it,
Because they're CDL
that's
tests,
why it takes longer
They can
too.
do it in urgent care.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
you could
urgent
in a
care
cup and I
might
could
just-
tell you.
which is
in a
probably
minute.
why it takes 2 or 3 days for
Yeah.
them to get our results because.
Mhm.
there's-
I mean, I think that that's nice.
Oh, I do too, because there's no question.
Yeah. What's also nice is you always have the name of the tester on those. And so you can call them if a problem comes up and ask them, you know, explain this to me.
And the other thing that I like, because in here it talks about the employee giving consent,
Mhm.
and you have to sign the forms down there. When you go down for your test, you have to sign those tests.
That is
Yeah,
correct.
it's required.
Okay.
Yeah.
to give consent.
Okay.
So yeah, they fill out the paperwork and then you have to sign it, and
Yeah.
then you have to sign all your samples. It's.
Yeah.
They do
I
well.
want to say that paperwork says live block across the top of it or something, but I can't remember for sure.
And Janelle, you can call and confirm with them, but I'm almost positive that guy said everything goes to a lab.
Well, I know they go to a lab because some of those, like one of the guys that we was hiring in PW, he wanted to start right away and they wanted to start right away and they said no. Not until those test results come back. Because one time they did that and I didn't know it. And the guy came back positive
Well, goodness.
Yeah.
and I still had to pay him.
Yep.
I had to go through the whole process of putting him in the system and still
Yeah,
pay
that's
him and
annoying.
terminate him because he was positive.
So that covers us on 9A then, and it's still expressing the reserve the right to change, modify, or delete any provisions included in this board policy without notice.
I like that.
Yeah, me too.
Cool.
I'm sorry, I was reading and asking questions, I should have said the whole thing.
No, it's a work session. We're working. Cool. Well, I don't have anything else. Like I said, the chief and I will figure out if, I don't think we need an evidence room policy because we have one,
Well,
so.
I think we determined.
I was
that
just complying with
departmental
the
policy.
requests.
So
Not
in the big book that you just got,
Mhm.
you'll see there's a whole thing about processing of evidence, how it goes to the evidence room. There's a whole thing about the evidence custodial position, says no more than 2 people, it addresses all the things in the report that you guys didn't probably have to review to, but it's clearly there. So, because the book has grown exponentially since I got here. When I got here, I think it was that big. Now it's like that big.
But Mayor, I will get you a fraternization policy,
Okay,
updated one.
So,
yeah,
I have notes about when you talked about it
good,
before.
because
so.
I know we talked about a minor change, but.
It was just confusing,
Yeah.
I think, and it
Yeah.
needs some bolstering. So we'll get it and then the new council can discuss it. We'll go from there. So it'll be good.
Well, did you have fun tonight?
Yes,
Everyone check?
I could go longer, so I'm sorry about that.
Sorry.
I think that's all we got for this evening.
Thank you.
just to update you, the trailer over here on Yellowstone, paperwork, it's not gone in 70 days, which is like March 24th.
Wow, cool.
This is the one we already talked about or a new one?
New one.
This is the one we had to go outside.
Would you
of
mind
their
pulling my
firm
plug? It's the
because
bottom one.
They had a conflict.
But we
Thank you.
already-
Uh-huh.
Or no, that was the other two, wasn't it?
Yeah, this is different than this one.
This is a whole new one.
This is the one out on the corner of Evans and Yellowstone
going
at the
to-
very end, where the guy that